And oftentimes once we start incorporating some of those foods that feel bad or off limits, it takes that pressure off. And it's like, okay, I'm allowed to have these. I have permission to have these foods. I can have them tomorrow. I can have them later today. Once we start thinking like that, it becomes the food has less control over us, right?
Welcome to Talkin' Shit, the podcast where we get real about the unfiltered truths women face in the quest for perfection. I'm Jana, your host, a dietitian and fellow woman navigating the pressure to have it all together, the perfect body, career, relationships, and making it all look effortless. Who set that standard anyway? Here, we're calling out the diet fads, hustle culture, beauty standards, and everything else that keeps us feeling stuck. But we're not just venting, we're diving into how to break free and rewrite the rules on your terms. So grab a coffee or a glass of wine and let's talk some shit. Together, we'll uncover how to live a life that's unapologetically yours. This is Talkin' Shit. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Talkin' Shit podcast, everyone. I have another wonderful dietitian with me. I'm so excited because as of late, we have been highlighting dietitians, which you guys know I absolutely love. And today I have Margot Whitney with me. She is going to dive into a very interesting, I'm going to say, and layered topic. So I'm so excited to be able to open up this space and have this conversation with you, Margot. But before we get into it, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Okay, awesome. It's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Margot. So I work for my own practice. It's called Margot Whitney Nutrition, and I'm based in Massachusetts. And I work with a wide variety of patients, but I would say my kind of target demographic, if you will, is people who are struggling with relationship with food. I work with a lot of postpartum women, pregnant women, fertility, kind of all in that realm. I'm a mom of two, so I love working with moms and helping them through challenging times. But I'm so excited. This is like one of my most passionate topics because I think that I was just saying to you before we recorded, I think like 90% of our patients struggle with emotional eating. So I think it's such an important topic. So I'm really excited to dive into that today.
Ready to lose weight, feel in control around food, and build a lifestyle that actually lasts? The Healthy Body Collective is my monthly coaching community where you get expert guidance from me, Jana, live coaching, real accountability, and a supportive group of women who actually get it. You can click the link in the show notes to join now. See you inside. Yeah. Okay. So you said our relationship with food, and that oftentimes is a very new thought that we even have a relationship with our food. So when you say our relationship with food, like, what do you mean by that?
Yep, we all have one, right? So, it's so complicated, right? And it's different for every single individual. And that's why getting personalized care is so critical. But when I think about relationship with food, my thought is like, there's a lot of questions that can go into that. But my thought is, how do you think about food? Is it always on your mind? Do you have that constant like food noise in your head? Do you categorize foods as good versus bad? Do you sort of think in a black and white, like all or nothing way around food? Or do you, just really enjoy food and, you know that it's very valuable and that it provides, certain benefits. And it could be sort of a mix of both of those things, right? Like we can really enjoy and love food, but we can also have a challenging relationship with it. And we can struggle to know when we're actually hungry, when we're actually full. The reasons behind your eating. Is it physical hunger? Is it more driven by emotion? So it's complicated and it's evolving and it's changing. And I think a lot of people start developing their relationship with food when they're very, very young. Typically what I see is that children and toddlers and young kids are very intuitive eaters and they're really good at listening to their bodies. But then as you get older, it becomes a lot more challenging because there's a lot going on, right? In terms of messages that you're seeing online. We live in a society where everyone's on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and we're seeing all this chatter about, more protein is better or this diet or that diet. And it can really affect the way that you think about food, and it can affect the way that you listen to your body, and ultimately change that relationship. That was a long answer, but I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something I just love. I'm so excited about this conversation because we're actually having a conversation around this Because for so many women that I've worked with, and I'm sure that you work with as well, it maybe they have spent 20, 30, 40 years attempting a diet or really in the space of diet culture versus nutrition and health, which is very, very different. And so they feel like if they have a meal plan or if they're just told what to eat or what not to eat, then it will, and I'm air quoting, like fix the problem. But that is only one small portion, right? Like it's good to have nutrition education and get more information around like nutrition and what that looks like for the individual. But then there's this whole other space, which is that relationship with food. And how do we navigate that? That I think we don't talk enough about, but we're starting to. And so you said that we are the food therapists. What happened? And I love that term because I think it's such a great way to understand. Because when we're dealing with emotional eating or stress eating or however we want to call it, we're dealing with emotions that we typically place into that therapeutic or the therapist realm. So how do we bridge that and still stay, if you will, like within our scope of practice as dietitians?
Yeah. Yep. The relationship with food is like the biggest piece to actually make sustainable change, right? Because if we're like I love what you said about how, people come in, they want a meal plan, they go on a diet. That doesn't fix the issue. I think we see often in practice is, you might lose 10, 20, whatever it is, weight on this diet that you're going on, whether it's like Whole30 or keto or whatever it is. But the weight comes back if you don't actually work on that relationship with food. So to answer your question about kind of like bridging that gap and making sure we stay in our scope, it's really about what I like to work on is really about going into, what you're eating on a day-to-day basis and what emotions came up with those meals or snacks. And also checking in on physical hunger, because that's a piece of it too, that sometimes if we're not in touch with our physical hunger, we can push that aside and ignore it for as long as possible until it bubbles over, right? And then we're getting to like, let's say if we think of a hunger scale on 1, you're starving, 10, you're super full. You're getting to like a 1 or a 2 before you eat. That's going to lead to you going really quickly to a 10, right? And overeating, which is often driven by our emotions and our relationships with food. So really getting into that, like what's coming up around mealtime, like what's driving you to eat, where are you on the hunger scale? And trying to figure out exactly what's going on in certain moments of like the day-to-day process, and then really identifying how can we take actionable steps to make change there. And there is a therapy piece of it that's very important that is not in our scope. And that's why I always recommend for people who are really, really struggling with their relationship with food and emotional eating, and even getting into that maybe disordered eating realm, the therapy relationship is critical. So I really, really encourage people who are struggling to have both people on their care team, a dietitian and a therapist.
Yeah. Because, okay, so I want to take this a step deeper is because when we start exploring your relationship with food, we also start exploring your relationship with yourself.
Totally.
And so many women have shared with me that as they're starting to get curious about their relationship with food, they have to start really looking at how do they ultimately care for themselves and what emotion comes up when they start caring for themselves consistently. And some women have shared like this is where they start feeling guilt or shame or frustration or resentment, or like there's so many things that start to unpack themselves when we start exploring how do we ultimately go to food to cope, soothe, distract, feel better, right? Like there's all these things. And then that starts really looking at that relationship with self, which they're both hand in hand, right? Like, so if you, for example, you work with moms or a lot of moms tune in, if you're telling like your son or daughter that they need to eat, but then you're not eating, why is that?
Right.
Why do you tell them that they need to nourish and fuel your body, but you don't feel like you deserve to also do that for yourself? And so those are the questions that we start exploring and just say like, can we sit with this? Can we just understand it without judgment, without shame, without any of that? Can we just get curious to see Why are we telling others to do something that we know is good for them? And we're not doing that for ourselves. And that is one of my favorite spaces to be in because that's where like the light bulbs start going off, or just like really the understanding, right? Like we just want to understand, like, is this working or is this not working for you?
Yeah.
If it's working, we can keep it. If it's not working, how do we want to shift that?
Totally. I couldn't agree more. Like if your child, you're going out to ice cream and your child notices that you're not participating, that's like light bulbs are going off in their head too. And that's going to ultimately impact their relationship with food. So I think once we put the pieces together of like, oh, wow, my maybe negative relationship with food, my kids are seeing that. And they're soaking it in. They want to be just like us, right? When they're that young, like they want to be like mom and dad, or mom and mom and dad, whatever it is, they want that. So they're looking at us to build their own relationship with food. And I think once that soaks in, especially for a lot of the parents that I work with, it's like, okay, this is something I really need to dive into and figure out. And I think one thing that you said is interesting is, kind of about all the emotions that come up of trying to maybe like mask or make things better, right? Like we use food as a tool to like make us feel better. Like I had a bad day, so I'm going to eat a sleeve of Oreos, or I'm going to, have a glass of wine and some ice cream or whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But it can become a problem when it leads to maybe like a binge eating episode where you're eating so much that you feel like physically ill because, you might think that using food to make you feel better is the solution, but it's often just kind of a temporary Band-Aid that you're putting on things, right? We can put that Band-Aid on, but it's going to fall off and the wound is still going to be oozing, right? So I think that's the thing that like once that's identified too is like, oh, this actually isn't helping my problem. This isn't helping my emotion or like the thing that I'm struggling with. It's actually making it worse, and it's making me feel more guilt and shame, and those feelings are getting more intense, and I'm not even enjoying the food that I'm eating, right? So I think that's something that I really like to explore and dig in deeper to, because once that connection's made, it's like, okay, how can we work on breaking this cycle?
Yeah. Yeah, because food won't fix emotional eating. And I think that's a big distinguisher of if we know that you're in a space where emotions have taken over and we're attempting to go, or we are going to food in an attempt to fix that, it will like almost do it, right? Like you'll always want more. That's why oftentimes like you feel like you're out of control or like you're a bottomless pit. It's because the food is not actually going to solve the problem. It will solve the problem if you're truly physically hungry. But if you're dealing with emotional hunger, this is where it's like, okay, well, food won't fix the fact that you were like pissed at your boss, or that you're like struggling with, dealing with family situations, or like, oh, you feel like you let yourself down one more time because you said you were going to do this and you didn't do it, right? Like food won't fix those things. We actually have to rip that Band-Aid off and address what's at the core of what's drawing you to that food. And it's always interesting because individuals will say like, I feel so out of control with food, but that's the space that they actually have the most control. So can we break that apart a little bit? Because like with emotional eating, so many people have said like, I feel so out of control. I feel addicted to food, or like food essentially controls them. But it's like that's the mind playing tricks, because in that moment, they actually have the control over the food.
Right.
How do we get that backwards?
Yeah, it's so hard and it can feel like that, but you're right, it's not the case. And I often find that happens with a lot of people who are actually under eating during the day, right? So we're not properly fueling our bodies, we're not getting enough. And it's like your physical hunger is building, right? If we're not, addressing that throughout the day in regular intervals, the goal isn't to eat when you're starving only, right? It's to be eating constantly throughout the day and make sure that you're staying in a good place and your body's in like a homeostasis, right? You don't want to feel like you're having these extreme highs and extreme lows with food, because that's going to lead to intensifying emotions and feeling like you're losing that control. So if we can start managing our meal pattern a little bit better, and that often is really where dietitian support is so helpful, and figuring out like, okay, what times should I be eating? How much should I be eating? Like what foods are going to make me feel full and satisfied? It can help you feel like it's easier to kind of grasp that control that you have. And not lose sight of that. Like, okay, I am the leader in my food choices and my decisions, right? And I also think like sometimes we need to acknowledge that like there is some emotion tied to food for all of us. And that's important and that's good, right? Like there's like a certain part of it that's really good. Like we want to be able, I mean, now I'm thinking holiday season, right? Like I'm going to make Christmas cookies with my daughter on Friday and I'm so excited because it's going to be like such a joyful experience. And I hope it's one of those memories that we have every year and she can like carry throughout her life. It's a positive emotion experience, but it's when it becomes, you know, kind of masking negative emotions that it becomes really concerning, right?
I don't know if you realize how powerful your statement was, but you said the goal isn't to only eat when you're starving. I think that's going to be a big eye opener for a lot of women because if we have like that emotional hunger space. So let me get some context to this. A lot of women that I have heard or that have shared their stories with me have said that have struggled with emotional eating have said, I'm not really hungry in the morning, so I might have some coffee or something light. And then I get going and I get busy. I'm not really hungry throughout the day. And then around like 3 or 4 p.m., I start to really get hungry. I have my first meal and then I feel out of control with food. That's a huge pattern, I would say, with the majority of the women that say they struggle with emotional eating or feel out of control with food. That's generally a pattern that is seen with most women. And so really what we're looking at, okay, how do we tune into true physical hunger? Because it was there the whole time, but we didn't tune into it, right? And so that's where we really work to fuel and nourish the body to give it what it needs, because that hunger is so important to tell us like what's actually happening in your body. And when we address that, then it seems like, oh, now food doesn't have this control over me, or I feel like I can better navigate different situations because I'm not as starving, right? Like, and that's all a biological response that we're really addressing.
Yeah, I hear the same thing all the time from people. It's like, I'm not really hungry in the morning, and then I kind of get busy and I don't think about it. And you know, maybe I start to get a little hungry, but I'm in my work and I just don't think about it until it's, you know, later in the day and I'm starving and I lose all control, right? So sometimes it's getting started. It's really about like forcing yourself to eat breakfast. And it doesn't have to be a full blown, like I think that people get intimidated by eating breakfast because they think they have to go to the kitchen and make eggs and sausage and, you know, it has to be this whole like fancy thing. It doesn't, it can be like as simple as a protein bar or overnight oats that you prepare, you know, a few batches of the night before. Like it can be something quick and easy, or even like a banana with peanut butter, right? Like having something to get your body going in the day is going to help just start the regulation and start you to get more in touch with your hunger and fullness cues. And I've gotten a lot of pushback from people that I've worked with on like eating something in the morning, but I would say almost 100% of the time I hear over a few weeks of starting to eat something in the morning, oh, I'm starting to get more regular hunger cues and I'm starting to get more in touch with my body. I'm starting to be able to like actually listen and honor my hunger before I get to this really intense level of hunger that's, you know, driving me to feel out of control, right? Yeah. So it's kind of really just taking those baby steps and doing what works for you. And like I said, it might not be the big full-blown breakfast. Maybe we work up to a bigger breakfast over time. It could just be waking up, you know, going for a little walk, maybe an hour later, and then having a small snack to get things going if you're really not used to having food until later in the day, and slowly working on building in more. What can we add is something that I like to ask a lot of people as we're getting started with their meal plans and eating versus, you know, what can we take away? And when we come at it with that perspective, it really helps because you're not feeling this intense level of restriction all day that's leading to, more of these emotional eating sessions that for most people, I would say happen later in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And so hunger is not a bad thing. And some women have shared with me that they are very afraid of feeling hungry because that's also connected for them with a sense of being out of control.
Mhm.
And so what I'm hearing from you is that your hunger is actually really important and we want to feel it at multiple times throughout the day. What does that tell us as it relates to just like health as a whole?
Yeah, it tells us that our metabolism is running efficiently and effectively. Like we're getting those cues. So we're in touch with our body. We're hearing that. Um, if you're not getting hunger cues throughout the day, it's a sign that there's something wrong, right? Like something's not running properly and efficiently. No, it doesn't mean you have cancer or anything like that dramatic, but like there's luckily that this is the thing that I love about nutrition is like there's always things that you can do to improve it, right? Like there's always steps, really actionable steps you can take. So if you notice that you're not, hearing those hunger cues, you can start to work on that and take steps to make progress and get more in tune with that. And it's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing to wake up in the morning. When I hear women tell me that I woke up in the morning and I felt hungry, I'm like, yes, we're making progress. That's good. Like I get so excited because that means your metabolism is waking up and working efficiently and it's giving you those hunger cues that you're supposed to have. Right. And that's going to make it easier for like weight management and energy levels and reducing brain fog. It helps with so many different things, right? So working on that and getting in tune with your hunger and satiety cues and really listening to your body is just going to make a lot of the things that maybe feel hard right now a lot easier for you.
Which I think is completely different than what a lot of women have been taught as it relates to hunger, consuming food, dieting, weight loss, like all those things is really for many, I would say millions of women in particular, they've been taught that you eat less and that if you're like basically to suppress your hunger as much as you can, which is actually as you said, right, like reducing their metabolism, actually making weight loss harder. And usually those are the individuals that are struggling with their weight the most. So this is going to be a big mindset shift, I think, for a lot of women tuning in is that, yes, we want you to feel that hunger. Yes, we want you to fuel your body because that is like your metabolic, that is how your metabolism functions best, right? Like we get a metabolic benefit from eating food and we need that on board for you to feel your best.
Totally. I think we get so scared, like as women, we're like taught, like you said, to restrict almost. Like we're like, oh, like this is going to make us, have the perfect body and look a certain way and all of these things. But as you said, it can often do the opposite. Like it can work against your goals. Like if you're not eating, your metabolism is running very low. It's suppressed. It's not working efficiently. So, you're kind of training your body that like less food is what it needs. And that's not true, right? That can do things like stop you from having a period, affect your fertility, affect how you feel, affect your mood, lead to drastic mood changes and the emotional eating aspect, right? Like if we're chronically restricting, your emotional eating is going to be a lot more intense and it's going to be something that you're struggling with, right? Because there's got to be a breaking point. Like we need fuel to live. That's the thing with food. And I think what can be tricky about it is like, if you're an alcoholic, what do? You don't drink alcohol. You go to AA, you get support, right? If you're struggling with eating, you can't just stop eating, like unfortunately, there's not a way to survive without food, right? So actually, fortunately, because eating is wonderful. So it's really like diving into that and figuring and working on your relationship there. How can we find the joy in food again, right? Like that's such a big piece of it too.
Yeah. That is such a big piece that's really been taken out, especially with something that you mentioned earlier, which is like a lot of confusion around food of like what's healthy, what's not healthy, what's good, what's bad. And that's where I share like really the goal is to create a very neutral relationship with food because it's all relative. Right. Like, so, I mean, having some cereal in the morning is all relative of like, well, how much did you have? Did you pair it with other foods? Did you actually like it? Did it make you feel okay? Like there's so many questions that go into just that food. Like we can't say that food is bad because there's no across the board for every single person unless maybe you have an allergy or intolerance, then we want to get a little bit more selective, right? But like for most people, those foods are it's very relative and very neutral.
Totally. And I think if we are putting foods on a pedestal of like, or saying that a food is quote unquote bad for you or a bad food, it's actually putting that food on a pedestal, right? Like we're like, there's some reason that we have in our minds, or I can't have that food in the house because I'll lose control around it. Well, you know what? I want you to start having that food in the house, right? Like you need to figure that out. That's a problem, right? Like we should be able to have all foods in our house, whatever they are, and be able to include them in our diet. And sometimes when we just liberalize the way we think about foods and like let go of those food rules that we've put in our heads, it starts to take them off that pedestal slowly, right? So now like okay, let's say an example could be like Oreos. I don't know why I'm thinking I must want an Oreo. I'm going to have one with so that's a good example, right? So like I can't have Oreos and I hear this all the time from people when I'm talking to them. I can't have Oreos in the house because I totally lose control when I have Oreos. I'll eat the whole thing. And like, okay, so today I want you to have 2 Oreos with your lunch, and we talk about, okay, what's lunch going to look like? Let's make sure that we're balancing our plate. We have protein, fiber, we have, whole grain carbohydrates, we have some healthy fat, we have a good balanced meal. It's going to make you feel good and full and satisfied. And you also have 2 Oreos on the plate. And maybe you eat those before the meal. Maybe you eat them with it. Maybe you eat them after, but you're going to eat them in that sitting when you're eating the meal, right? And oftentimes once we start incorporating some of those foods that feel bad or off limits, it takes that pressure off. And it's like, okay, I'm allowed to have these. I have permission to have these foods. I can have them tomorrow. I can have them later today. Once we start thinking like that, it becomes the food has less control over us, right?
Right. Yeah. Because I call that the rebel in all of us. Like that little rebel does not like to be told what to do. And he or she will do anything and everything to make sure it's not told what to do. So if you're told like, don't have this, that little rebel goes crazy inside. And it's like literally trying to figure out like, how can I really get this? Because I'm a grown adult and no one's going to tell me what to do. So I love working with that rebel. And I love that strategy because it's kind of like an abstinence only program. Like it doesn't teach you anything, right? Like how, if you're in this situation, how are you going to navigate it so it's healthy for you? That's what we're doing when we're saying like, no, like cleaning out your cupboard. I mean, there can be some things that are helpful with that. Like if you're, well, sometimes you just need to clean out your cupboard, right? Like there's old food you need to get rid of.
Your spices are all expired. Get rid.
Right. Like, sometimes you just have to do a little cleanse, and I'm air quoting that. But if you were never taught, and this is where, again, diet culture doesn't allow you to even get curious about this, if you're not taught how to navigate the real food environment that we find ourselves in, like the fact, like where I live, there's fast food like everywhere. If I don't teach you as a dietitian how to navigate driving by fast food or those cravings, or like if I don't teach you that, then you're going to be stuck forever, right? Like, so you learn how to incorporate those foods, if you so choose, into a plan that works for you long term, to where we are still allowing you to enjoy food because, yes, they can taste delicious. And it's not at the expense of your health, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more. And it's like, it's not realistic to never be able to have certain foods. If you want to go out with friends and go to holiday parties and, live your life and enjoy your life, which you should, then like you're going to be exposed to these off limits food that you put in your head, right? They're going to be there. We're going to, there's going to be opportunity to have them. And then what happens then? If you can't control yourself with them around home, why would you be able to control yourself when you're out in public with those foods, right? So it's really like working on that relationship and starting to figure out like, how can we, neutralize these foods and take them off that like bad food list that you have in your head, get rid of that list, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing is like for those that may be struggling with emotional eating, like first and foremost, it's really looking at like, are you eating enough for the day, right? Like, are you having some type of breakfast? Are you like meals throughout the day to where we are fueling and nourishing your body so that's getting the nutrients that it needs in order to function really? Like that sounds like the first step, like for someone that is struggling with emotional eating. What would you say would be like the next thing that they could explore?
Yeah. So one thing I recommend that all of my patients do is start doing a food and feeling journal, which is really simple. It's not, a MyFitnessPal logging calories and counting macros type of situation. It's more just writing down what you're eating. And then before you have your meal or your snack, think about the hunger scale and where do you fall on that? Are you, before a meal, are you at a 1 or a 2? Are you starving, or are you more like a 3 or a 4? And then are you eating until you're a 10 and you feel really sick and maybe like post Thanksgiving dinner feeling for some people? Or are you eating until you're like full and satisfied and feeling good? So really keeping track of that, but then also writing down what else is coming up around mealtime, what emotions are coming up, how are you thinking about your food, how are you thinking about your meals, how is it making you feel? Really keeping track of that for, at least a week, and then diving into what areas are a struggle and figuring out how to troubleshoot those areas. And that's where the personalized care is so important, right? Because everyone's going to have a different experience with that. And where a dietitian can really get in there and start to, give you actionable things to work on, and improving that relationship with food and identifying when emotional eating is really taking over versus like physical hunger, right?
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing some clients of mine that when we start exploring this, they're like, but my goal was just to not have to think about food. Like now I feel like I'm thinking about food so much. What do you say to the person that shares that?
Yeah, I mean, and some people hate journaling and they're like, this isn't working. And it's, everyone's different, right? So if it's totally, this huge burden to be doing this, it's like, okay, let's pivot and think of something else. But it also doesn't have to be every single day for every single meal. It can just be something you try maybe like 1 or 2 days a week and see how that helps. And sometimes when we write things down on paper, it like takes them out of our heads a little bit and reduces that food noise. So sometimes if I get pushback, I'll be like, just try it. Okay. Just try it for like a day or two and see if it helps. It's kind of like, when you can't sleep at night, and if you write down everything that's stressing you out on paper, sometimes it can kind of relieve the stress. You can put it away for the night and go to sleep. Right. So, I always just encourage people to give it a try. And if it doesn't work, we can talk about another way to work on things. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I just like to be really honest with people is if you want to change your relationship with food, it's going to take some time, energy, and attention, right? Because we have to, the curiosity, something has to shift or something has to change if we want something to change. And so we kind of slow down in order to speed up. And it really gives us so much information. And usually that's where most people have like they can see now because they're being really intentional with food of like, oh, what's happening? And then it allows us to give them so much more support in other areas to really address the problem, if you will.
Yeah, like I remember someone I was working with recently, and she like identified that she wasn't eating enough between lunch and dinner. Like there was a big gap there. It was like a 6-hour gap. She was having lunch at noon, and then she wasn't getting home till later from work, and her husband would like make dinner, and then she would end up just like snacking all after dinner because she wasn't eating enough, right? So we added in an intentional snack, in between lunch and dinner that was pretty well balanced. And she noticed a huge improvement. Like she wasn't thinking about food all night. She wasn't like going for multiple snacks after dinner. She was able to just really like regulate everything and feel a lot better. So it's kind of, even just identifying little things like that and making small just like realistic, sustainable changes, right? And that's what it is. It's like baby steps, right? Because what I always talk about is like, I'm not putting you on a diet. I'm not giving you a diet plan or a meal plan to follow for like X amount of time, because those things don't work. I want to work on small, sustainable habits, because that's really where you're going to ultimately see change that sticks, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And also to allow for it to change. So I'm thinking about like women that have regular periods, right? Like your hunger and your emotions are going to change throughout your cycle, even. And so
Okay.
that's why we want to explore it more than just, like 3 days. Yes, it gives us information, but no, that it's going to change based on where you are in your cycle, or even like the weather. I'm thinking about the weather, like the weather changes how we eat and like the emotions around that. There's so many factors. So it's not going to, even when you start to like identify things, like give yourself permission for it to also change as other variables change. Like we're not static human beings. And that's another reason why like meal plans don't work, is because they assume that you stay the same, and you
Yeah.
don't. You're meant to change. And again, full permission to do that. And then we just stay curious of, okay, what's going to work in this phase of your life?
I love that you said that, because I think we get so stuck in like, portion sizes and like, how much should I be eating? But it's not going to be the same every day. Like some days your appetite's going to be higher. Sometimes it's going to be lower. Maybe you're in your luteal phase and you have like this increased appetite, right? Or maybe you like slept really poorly and you have more cravings that day. You want more sugar. Like there's going to be things that affect, or like maybe you're pregnant or breastfeeding or going through fertility treatments. Like there's so many things that can affect your relationship with food, and how your appetite fluctuates and how you're making decisions around food. So that's why it's so important to really get like that continuous care and keep exploring and stay curious when it comes to food.
Mm. Okay, so making sure that they're eating enough, which is certainly something like just even from a calorie perspective, a dietitian can help with, just to make sure that you're at adequacy, right? Before we can change anything, we have to get to adequacy, because your body is not functioning optimally. And so that's like so important. And then we look at that hunger scale. Is there a resource that maybe we can put in the show notes for that hunger scale? Because I think a lot of people, that will be a new thing for them.
Yeah, I use like an image that I got. I forget where I got it, but I can send it to you if that would
Yeah.
be helpful. And I recently wrote a blog post about emotional eating, so I can send that to you too to share as a resource. But yeah, the hunger scale, even if you just Google, like if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to see it, just Google the hunger scale and you'll see kind of a visual of what we mean by that, right? And I usually think of it as 1 to 10. So really checking in on that before and after eating can be really helpful.
So helpful. It gives so much information, because also hunger isn't just like your stomach growling, right? Like, so even to be able to identify how does my body feel hunger can be like super helpful as well. But is there like a third thing? Like I always usually like 2 to 3 things, like for someone that's tuning in that they're like, okay, I really want to start working on this. Is there something else you would have someone do in their
Yeah.
own journey?
So I think another thing that can be really helpful is if you find, like, let's say you've done all the other things, like you are eating enough, you're eating well-balanced meals, but you can't get yourself out of the pantry at night. Create space between you and the food. Okay. So we know we're not physically hungry. We're well nourished. We ate enough. How can we create space? And that might be, calling a friend. It might be like knitting or like doing something with your hands. It might be reading a book or going for a walk. It could be, drawing a picture, painting, or doing some type of artwork, right? Like, and that's something you can actually explore with a dietitian, or in therapy. It can kind of be either one, but that's something that I explore with a lot of my patients is like, what are some ways that we can create some space between you and the pantry and help you in these moments? So maybe if it's like stress is really the thing that's driving the emotional eating, we identify it's like stress coming up with like work related situations. Okay, when you're stressed, when those feelings come about, the first thing we're going to do is pull out your journal and we're going to write down exactly what's going on in your head. The second thing we're going to do is call mom and go for a walk, like kind of coming up with some of those strategies together. And it can be something you think through on your own or talk through with a professional.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Because again, it gets you back into your body. And I actually have an acronym for that. I call it BAM. And intentionally, I wanted it to be like very like in your face. Because usually, like if we get into that space, right, like we're getting into that unconscious, just like default behaviors. And so that space really allows you to become more intentional with decisions, but it stands for breathe. So just take like a breath, like just take a beat. It's okay, right? Assess, like, how are you feeling? What's going on? Where are you? Because a lot of times you go just totally like blank. A lot of women have shared with me, like, I don't even remember eating that. Like, it was just like it default, right? And then move or mantra, right? Like move into a different environment. If you're in the kitchen, go into the living room. If you're in the living room, go outside if you can. Go up into your bed, right? Like just do something where it changes your environment because something in there is triggering you essentially. Or mantra, right? Like so create a mantra where your body knows you're safe and you are in control. So a lot of women will say like, I'm okay, or whatever that thing is. And like, and then I do like for them to like touch their body because it can be for some, it's an out of body experience. And so if you can come back, touch your chest, your shoulders, your stomach, something, it signals to your body like, hey, I'm online, I'm not offline. I'm going to calm down and really regulate myself. That can be really, really helpful to create that space. And then if you still eat, you eat because it was an intentional decision versus an unintentional decision.
I love that. I'm going to steal that. That's amazing.
Yeah, please. And it's so like, we just want to jar the body, right? Like it's going into some default modes and we just want to like bring it back out because that is really a lot of nervous system regulation or like those default patterns that we all have.
Totally. And I'm a huge fan of mantras and, positive affirmations. So even like I'll tell my patients, like, write something down that helps you. Write it down, put it on paper, and put it somewhere you can see it. Maybe it's the whiteboard on your fridge. Maybe it's like a little sticky note on your computer, like whatever it is that's going to help you, for like improving that relationship and thinking about food in a more positive way. And, for instance, a lot of my eating disorder patients, it's like, what are your motivators to recover from your eating disorder? Let's write those down and start like looking at them every day. Right.
Yeah. There's no shame in this game. And I really want to encourage more women to talk about this. And this is why I called the podcast Talking Shit, because we're talking about the shit that really impacts us. And I know so many women are struggling with it, and men, frankly, are struggling with emotional eating, and they don't feel like they can really talk about it because there's so much shame around how much maybe you do eat. But this is neutral ground. We're just here to really support you, to have an understanding so that you can feel your best. And that feeling is different for every person.
Totally. And I think people feel a lot of judgment when it comes to food and food choices. And that's why working with a dietitian is so helpful, because we are literally trained to not judge your food decisions. And we actually do not judge. We just want to help. Where can we help? Where can we make you feel better? Because, it's hard. Food can be challenging. That relationship can be really challenging to figure out and improve and work on, because it's something that just can't be ignored. You need to eat. It's important. And we want you to start enjoying your food and feeling good about your food choices and not feeling like guilt and shame and negative emotions around it.
Yeah, so true. Margot, I so appreciated this conversation. I think it's going to be helpful to a lot of individuals. And then, any resources that you have that you feel would be helpful, we will certainly put in the show notes and link to your website, your blog, or whatever, so that individuals can have that information and can form that really healthy relationship with food.
Awesome. This was so much fun. I love chatting with you. It's so nice to connect with other dietitians. So thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.